We finally started.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Right. So, welcome everybody. We've already got quite a few people on the call, so welcome. My name's Kate, I'm the director of The Big Draw, and I am delighted that lovely Pinkie Maclure is joining us today on our Instagram Live, part of our ongoing Drawing Conversation Instagram Live series. And one of my colleagues, one of my in the team, has reliably informed me that this is apparently the 17th episode, which I have to say I was quite surprised about. There you go. I was reminded by my colleagues that not only will we be able to find the Drawn In Conversation over on YouTube, which but we've also got it going on to podcast as well now on Spotify. So I had my little note. I know what I'm supposed to do. So thank you for the team for that. So we've got just under an hour with Pinkie. We've got a lot to get through. As we go through, people can put questions in. I'll do my best to thread in through a few as we go along. But I know that I've got a lot to say, and I'll do our best to try and thread in as many as we can as we go along. But there's certainly, I've just been looking at all my notes, there's a lot to get through. So shall we kick off? Let's start, Pinkie. Are you comfy and ready to go?
Yes. Sorry, I'm fidgeting about, so I'm ready now.
No, I can see you. I see you've got your matching coordinated, and can you see that I deliberately?
Oh yes. Always. Thank you. Yeah,
I even
very important. Very, very important. Oh yes.
Never mind. So I wanted to start with northeast coast of Scotland. Art was her identity. So when we were chatting the other day, you were talking about growing up as a child, and you were talking about your early passion for art and making and drawing and designing and doing and all of those sorts of things. And I've got the other thing I've got written down here, and I know that you don't mind me saying this. I've also got the word school weirdo down. Now you and I both know what that's about. So in terms of kicking off, can you just start to tell everybody about your early experiences, your passion for art and wanting to be creative and do stuff, and obviously as a child wanting to express these things, and your early experiences with the school, where things start for you? I think that's a good place to start.
Yes, well, my first school encouraged art, and my parents were very encouraging about art. It became kind of my thing, and I drew all the time, all my spare time. I was always drawing. If the telly was on, I was always drawing as well, and it was very much my identity as far as I was concerned in primary school and secondary school. And I also loved all the arts and performing arts as well, but I felt very at home with drawing. And then I moved schools at 14 to not far away, only about 40 or 50 miles away, a bit further south. This was quite far north in Scotland, northeast of Scotland, kind of about 50 miles west of Aberdeen. But it was a small farming community, and there was absolutely no recognition of the arts at all in the school. The art teacher was a miserable git, and he was pretty sexist and managed in the space of 2 years to completely put me off, and I just gave up completely for years until I was probably about 35. I completely gave up. And it actually, I think, had quite a bad effect on my mental health, or it certainly contributed to a lot of the problems that I had in my teens and 20s, because I didn't have, like I say, it was my identity, and I didn't have a way to express myself. I was searching for a way to express myself, and I'd completely lost confidence in being able to do it through drawing, so I had to find something else, and it was hard.
Yeah, and if you're not getting that support, and I think it's one of those things that we find a lot in these conversations, just also in wearing different work hats, is just, the role of the teacher is not to be underestimated. The power of a good or a poor teacher, they really can be incredibly influential. They can really, in those years, if they're very supportive and imaginative and encourage the child, just how that can be like in a positive way. But equally, if it's not a positive teacher if they're undermining. It can be quite devastating, I think, on a child.
Well, we were just, it could have been brilliant as well, because there were only two of us in the art class, and we're both girls, and we're both considering going to art school. And, both of us didn't. And I can remember so vividly, we were doing art history, and he was showing us all these slides of various famous paintings. And there was, I think it was a Bouchard, is that the one with a very sort of, well, it was very plump nude with her bum to the viewer. And I just remember he turned around to us and said, "Doesn't that just make you want to slap her bottom?" And I just remember thinking,
God. Really?
And that was the kind of level of thing we were up against, We were thinking, no. So it was not good. And actually, when I left, I remember him saying to us both, "So are you going to pursue art? You're not going to pursue art then?" And we were like, "No, we're going to do something else." And he said, "Oh, well, I hope I haven't put you off." So he must have realised at least what he'd done, but it's too late by then.
No, it's very damaging. But I mean, for other people coming on the call, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about your work around stained glass, and Pinkie is the most exquisite stained glass artist. We'll be talking quite a lot about that. But you have other strings to your bow, and you can't keep a good girl down, can you? But after stained glass, you sing as well, and I didn't know this until today. But you have a number of albums, do you not?
Yes, many. I think it's 9 or 10, could be 10. I did 3 on my own and 7 with John Wills, my partner. And that's been up until this. Yeah. That's been my life, really. That and work. Sorry?
Yes, you're channeling that creativity. It's also a stifle, channeling it into the music, which is, I suppose, something you think at least you can do that. And I know when we were talking, you were juggling that and doing other bits and bobs and jobs and working in bars and singing and doing all the gigs and everything else. And it was around that time, I think, that you got a job, didn't you? And I suppose it's changed in a way. It may not have been the best job for you for reasons that you can tell everyone on the call, but it did really put your life in a different direction. So do you want to start to tell people about the organisation?
Well,
the business, basically.
For years, I was just working in pubs or as a cleaner or in cafes or whatever I could do to support myself whilst trying to have a music career, which was just endlessly disappointing. I mean, record deal after record deal that just went wrong. And it was really, really seriously distressing and frustrating. And then a friend of mine had a hobby of making stained glass, and he was just kind of repairing front doors and making replicas of Victorian stained glass. And he was getting lots of work, so he asked me to help him because he had too much work. And I really didn't think this was something I could do because I'm not particularly practical, and I'm not good at things that involve lots of measuring and precision and symmetry. But nevertheless, it paid a lot better than working in the pub did. So I helped him, and the work kept coming, and the business kept going, and that went on for years and years and years. And I didn't particularly like the work, to be honest, because it wasn't very creative.
Just to be clear for people on the call, just so people know for the role that Pinkie was doing, this wasn't a sort of a fine art business where people are spending millions of pounds on something. It was probably a perfectly serviceable. I'm not knocking it, but it was if somebody wants to get a nice, pretty stained bit of glass, and it's
glaze. It's glazing. It's an awful lot of the time people were either just replacing something that got broken, or they didn't like the neighbours looking in, so they wanted something,
There might be we're not talking about particularly, are we here? So that's what you were doing.
No, it wasn't creative. And actually, after a few years of this, I started to get really frustrated because I just thought, why do people want to make stained glass ugly? It's just ugly. And because if you use really cheap glass and make very simple, big blocks of cheap glass, it's ugly to me anyway. And I, because I was in doing this every day, you know, inevitably my curiosity led me to starting to look at more and more stained glass, and bought a few books and really fell in love with the really old painted allegorical stained glass and the strangeness and oddness and kind of anarchic nature of it, with all the cracks and the millions of lead lines in bizarre places and the funny stories and the weird faces, and I just thought, oh, this is great. This is I'd love to do something like this, but of course, you know, trying to convince your average commissioning customer that that's what they want is nigh on impossible. So eventually, I just thought I'll just have to take this into my own hands and start making them, and put them in light boxes and see if I can do it that way. And that's all I do now.
Wasn't it?
Sorry.
It wasn't that long ago.
Fairly recently. I mean, the first, it was sort of 2012, I think I first started. Well, actually, in 2011, I did get, I tendered for a job at a sexual health clinic in Edinburgh, who said, anything you want, it's a sexual health clinic. It's something about the family, but that's it, which was amazing because nobody ever said that. So then I just went for it and said, this is what I want to do. And they won the tender. And after that, I thought, maybe people do like this after all. Maybe this is a thing that communicates to people. I'm going to make a few more of these. And off and on, you know, in sort of dribs and drabs for a little bit, because I was still working in doing all the boring stained glass. And then eventually I thought, right, I'm going to knock that in the head completely and just focus totally on making this art. And it's just been fantastic, because it's completely sorted my head out after all these years of just feeling like I was this nutcase who did weird music and, you know, was this sort of freak at school, and just feeling like I was always a problem. And now it's kind of like, oh, people can relate to me. Maybe I'm not a nutcase after all.
This is the thing that I can do that I love and I'm good at. But I mean, it's the point where it wasn't that long ago, and when we were speaking last, you were saying, you know, it's fantastic because some of your work has recently been snapped up by the National Museums of Scotland, I believe, which is incredible. No, I mean, and I think it just shows you. It shows you you've got to the distance travelled in a relatively short period of time from being a self-taught artist, and now you're you know, you're commissioned, and you know, you're coming and going into national collections, which I mean, I think that's incredible and speaks volumes. But I mean, just going back, because you know that when we were talking, because I love all of this, there was some of the stuff. I think the reason where I first met Pinkie was through the John Ruskin Prize, wasn't it, Pinkie? So the Big Draw also runs the John Ruskin Prize and exhibition, and we had it must have been end of 2019 now, because we didn't do it last year, did we? So yes, we had a prize, and it was very much about, again, it was about politics and the economy and making change. Very not dissimilar to the theme we've got out with our festival yesterday, Make the Change. So looking at societal economic shifts, that sort of thing. So we had some really challenging work in there. It was a fantastic exhibition. And one of our shortlisted artists was Pinkie. And it was that beautiful one of the lady. And you look at it and it looks sort of medieval in a way. You look at it and then you realise that's not a halo. It's syringes, possibly heroin syringes, who knows. And you look a bit closer and you see at the bottom there's sort of children. Yeah, there's children skipping around, but actually they're not that happy. And then it's what you were saying about it's the iconography, it's the allegory, it's taking some of those sort of very, very sort of traditional historic things that you see popping up all the time through different periods, you know, particularly medieval period, but right through, obviously, pre-Raphaelites reclaimed all of that and did it their own way. But you see that, you put it back out there. But even if you go back to the original medieval glass, as you were referring to earlier, it is quirky. It's not. I think, you know, we were saying, you know, pre-Raphaelites and Victorian. And I'm not saying it's not beautiful, and I love that period, but it is sanitized in a way. If you go back to the medieval period, there's something very sort of gritty about it, and you know, there are quite challenging themes in there, and there are gargoyles and weird. It's very sort of Angela Carter-esque, and there's like some dark fairy, and they just sort of jumble it all up together. I don't sort of worry about it too much, and the quality of the glass as well shines through, and the workmanship, the craftsmanship or craftswomanship, all that sort of stuff. So I love all of that. I love that storytelling, and I think for me that's what you are. You are a most incredible storyteller, Pinkie. But I would love it. I think it would be interesting to hear a bit more about the process. So with the stained glass, the process from the beginning to end for you, because some of the things that I was fascinated about, I wrote them down. There was a special type of glass, sort of vitreous glass. I think it's important that the glass
flash glass.
Yes. So, but from the beginning to end, they're sketching out the designs, and then this puzzle. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with the glass, and the glass has to be hand blown in a certain way because of the quality and the way that you etch in to get the colour.
Yes.
I mean, people would love to hear more about that, the process.
I mean, that's the reason I think why so much stained glass doesn't look great is because the raw materials are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Cheap mass-produced glass doesn't look nice, and hand-blown glass looks really amazing. And actually, there's very few people. There's hardly anybody in this country that makes that anymore. Only 2 places, I think, and it's a really specialised thing. I don't do. They blow it and make a tube, and then slit it down the middle when it's still soft, so that it falls into a flat sheet. And the really skilled one is where they make flashed glass, which is a colour on one side and clear on the other, and that's what I use, because you can't put white on a colour in the way that you can when you're on a opaque surface. Anything that you put on the colour is going to look like black because it's blocking out the light. So what you need to do is remove it, create white, and then you can paint on it or do whatever you want with it. But that is a massive anyway. To do that I really felt I was starting to produce really good stuff. And there are various things you can do. You can do it with acid etching, with engraving, or with sandblasting. The second 2 is what I do. And that just opens up loads of possibilities. But it does mean you have to have lots of specialist equipment. And when you're self-taught, that's going to be a bit daunting. I've had lots of addiction with heavy over the years. I just about know what I'm doing now.
I just cut out for 20 seconds. Are you hearing me okay? Thank you.
Yes, you cut out a bit.
Yeah, I suspect children on downstairs on the computer again. They're not supposed to be. Hopefully you can hear me. So yeah, so there's all these different aspects to it, isn't there, with the glass, but then there's also, not only is there the puzzle, because we were talking about this. So imagine you've got you sketched out your design, you're starting to think about colour and shape and form and etching and all the rest of it, but it has to fit together, and it has to fit together with making allowances for the strips, the lead to go in the middle. So you're having to envisage all of this before you put all the bits together.
Yes, most likely these years of tedious
it's quite
learning how to do the mechanics of it. I mean, I learned to make stained glass using lead, but to copper foil because it's much more lightweight, and it has some drawbacks, but it means that you can get a bit more detail in, because obviously the lead takes up quite a lot of space. But I mean, there's not that much between them, and I mean that's quite more. Well, that was only invented in the 19th century. whereas
Yeah,
lead was
absolutely.
being used.
And then obviously there's in terms of the painting of the different pieces, and that all has to fit together as well.
Yes, well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to draw out some kind of plan first. Usually what I do is I maybe start with a really rough, spontaneous sketch, which gives me the sort of initial idea. And then I might build that up into a digital collage, adding odds and sods that I found online and little ideas, and I just make little notes and things. I don't draw out a full cartoon because there's no need to, because the only reason that they used to do that was that an artist would draw the cartoon or the drawing on a plan and then give it to crafts people who would make the stained glass, whereas I'm doing both, so I don't need to, there's no point in me drawing it twice. So I just have a rough idea of it in my head or the sketch, and then I draw the plan out with all the pieces exactly to scale, and then I cut the first piece of glass and paint on it whatever figure or whatever it is that I want, and sandblast away any areas that I want to be white. And that, I mean, that process, there's lots and lots of processes involved in that. It might be engraved, sandblasted, and painted several times before it's finished.
Yeah.
And so it does theoretically join up with the next bit.
Yeah,
so if you have two different bits of glass, like for example, there was one time I did somebody fishing. So there was the fishing line which was going from the end of his fishing rod down into a pool. So that obviously the pool was a different bit of glass than the background of the fishing line. So, and I had this ridiculous sort of hair's breadth of a line that went down from the background and then joined onto this blue bit of glass. And, you know, and later you're putting it all together and just hoping that millimeter is going to meet up. Otherwise,
And in terms of some of the glazes, because I was on with a different hat on, Society of Designer Craftsman hat. I think I was on something involved with them the other week, and there was amazing ceramists talking about the glazes. And we talked a bit about this with the glass, because there's only certain colours you can get, isn't there? And how you, when it goes in and it comes out, you're not entirely sure what colours it's going to end up. It's a bit hit and miss.
It's, well, I mean, there are various different things that people do. People do use enamels. I don't use them very much. I do a bit, but I just find them very difficult. And also, I've experienced them just sort of coming up when I was doing windows that were exposed to the elements. Enamel quite often came off. Although you can get pretty much all the colours of the rainbow in that. It's very undependable, and it doesn't. Well, some people seem to manage to get it to stick to the glass and make it look really beautiful, but I've never managed to do that. Really, it tends to be a bit blobby. So I stick to the vitreous paints, which are just blacks, browns. Maybe a kind of redishy brown, and then there's silver stain, which was invented in the 16th century, I think, which is a silver nitrate that you paint on, and it creates a beautiful gold colour. But they're not all fired at the same temperature, so you have to do them all in separate firings, which makes it very slow and unpredictable. I mean, because it depends on what type of glass, especially the silver stain. If you use certain type of glass, it'll just react really badly, and other types of glass, it looks amazing. So you never really know quite what you're going to get.
I sort of like that, though. I like the fact that it must be frustrating. It was also sort of quite nice not knowing exactly how it's going to come out. It adds to the uniqueness of it.
Oh, it's always really exciting. It's always really exciting, and to be honest, it kind of has contributed to my desire to make windows that look a bit medieval, because if you're aiming for perfection with stained glass, it's just a nightmare. You know, what's the point? You know, you might as well make something that looks a bit odd.
Quirky. There's a question here saying, so presumably it's a process, this is from Willie, which takes a long time. How many hours go into one of your works? And does that mean you reflect upon what you, and I can't see the rest, but maybe you end up with? I don't know. So how long would it take? I mean, it takes a long time, doesn't it, for you to go?
Well, yes. I mean, this one behind me, if you can see it, that one, that Shall I see if I can
Yeah.
try and do that? Is that working?
Yeah. So what sort of size is that? Is
That's 60 centimeters by 60 centimeters. That took me about
that
4 to 6 weeks, I think. Beauty Tricks, which is the one that was in the John Ruskin Prize, that was 3 months that took me. So it takes a long time, but I'm getting faster. and actually, I like the slowness of it because I changed it as I go along. It's you get new ideas and you can put in wee bits and secret little things and it's I change it as I go along, and I like it. I like it for the fact that it's so slow and old fashioned, and there's something about that that's just a bit meditative and therapeutic.
Getting into the flow, absolutely, with it all.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I really thank you for that, because I think the process is absolutely fascinating, and maybe people don't quite realise just how much workmanship is going into all of this. One of the areas I've made notes on here, which I think is fascinating, so it's this idea about, I suppose it's about the heritage of stained glass. And obviously I think for a lot of people, they are inevitably going to, they're going to associate stained glass with churches, cathedrals. It's just inevitable. And there are some absolutely incredible, aren't there? And you look at some of the York Minster or something, you look at some incredible medieval artistry and architecture and artistry about what they've managed to do. But I'm wondering whether, because of not every, it's a more secular society we live in today, do you think that the art form or the craft form, because that's also another issue, isn't it? Where is it? Where does it sit within that continuum? Is overlooked today? Do you think it's overlooked because
Totally, yes.
Because of that,
there's enormous amount of prejudice, I think, both from Christians and atheists, actually, and other. I don't know about anybody else, but I have found that doing work for churches in the past, I don't do that anymore, but I found it incredibly difficult because I think that they think people associate it so much with this sort of dark, violent imagery of the Old Testament. They don't want, so they don't, well, I can't speak for every church, but certainly the churches that I worked for were steering away from anything except something very kind of bland. And people who are like non-church people tend to think it's a thing for churches. That's the end of that, which is weird because it doesn't have to be at all. I suppose maybe people also associate it with maybe pubs or toilet doors or something. It's just weird to me how, I suppose because if say I had gone to art school as I had intended to and become a painter, I would be probably painting pictures that are a bit like the stained glass that I make now, because it's coming from me. So why is that okay, but stained glass is not? Because I'm still painting, I'm still making a piece of art, I'm still telling a story and doing something unique, but there's still this sort of blindness to it, which is odd. I think maybe it's part of the mystery about how it's done. People maybe think it's, somebody said to me recently, I was showing them the sandblaster. She looked and she went, "Oh, so you just program that all do you, and all the images?" And it's like, no, it's a gun with sand. You blow it at the bit of glass. I've spent 4 hours cutting this stencil, which I drew by hand. Oh my God. I guess maybe that's what it is. People just can't believe that it's not done with some technology. But it's quite hard to get past.
Where we are today, that it was so big in the medieval, massive revival in the pre-Raphaelite Victorian period. It does feel I mean, that's not to say there aren't incredible people out there doing it. It does feel a bit overlooked, and I know we've had this conversation. I think people find it quite hard to place So, you know, they talk about it as, is it fine art? Is it art? Is it craft? Is it, where does it sit? Does it matter? I mean, I personally have issues around that continuum, because for me, it doesn't have to be this. It can absolutely be a very fluid continuum, but that's a personal view. But I know that there are plenty of organisations and people out there who do like to say, well, this is this and this is this. And, you know, I think sculpture's another of those things that it can be fine art, but it can also be craft. And I think some people might find it hard to place. And I remember you saying that you had experienced this. You know, that there had been some feedback at certain times from certain. I mean, I'm not mentioning any organisations, but they
no.
You know,
I was told that I wasn't. I was told that I wasn't a contemporary artist, which really confused me, because I just thought, does that basically mean I've just got to give up doing stained glass and paint pictures on canvas instead, and then I can be a contemporary artist?
It's like, how
odd
thing needs to be for you to be a contemporary artist? Have they actually looked at it on your glass?
Obviously.
It's pretty edgy, isn't it? I mean,
well, it's just stuff that I've seen, I'm afraid. I'm sad to say it's
whole notion. There's somebody on here, and I'm afraid I don't know who they are. So it's Florence Husserl.
Oh yes, Chagall.
So yeah. So they've been saying there's an NL. I don't know whether that's Netherlands or somewhere. I'm not sure. There is a revival of glass arts. We have a glass lab and artist. Oh yeah, there you go, Dane Bosch. So it sounds like there is. I mean, there's always going to be good stuff happening wherever. But I have also picked up on this strange, not quite knowing where to put. I think partly it is this whole like, oh, that's what happens. It's for churches, and people feel a bit uncomfortable about that, and they think that the themes are going to just be like religious themes, and that puts them off a bit. But I suppose there's also the challenges around the sighting of the work, which we've talked about. How you actually, you know, even if you commission the work and want to show the work in an exhibition, it does need to be lit. It needs a light box. It needs to be sighted appropriately. And the challenges of if a church did, or a faith space did commission some work, it does need to be put in an appropriate place to be appreciated. Otherwise, if it's in a corner, it's going to look too dark. So there's all of that around that as well. But it feels like there's a lot more work to be done on this as a art stroke craft form, however people to label it, I think. And especially when you're working at such a high level as well.
Yes,
anyway, I'm trying to be a champion for as a stained glass artist, because otherwise, as you said, and I wanted to pick up on the art school thing, you're saying maybe you'd have ended up as a painter, and you would have probably been a brilliant painter as well, but then there wouldn't have been someone like you waving and championing the role, the value of contemporary, exquisite contemporary stained glass. So maybe it's all worked out right.
I think so. And I mean, I feel like it's given me a direction. You know, maybe if I was a painter, maybe I'd still be struggling to find my own direction with that. Whereas with this, it's such a difficult medium to work with, and there's so much of it that I hate out there. But it's been quite easy, really, because I just think, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go that way, and it's kind of endless, because I can just translate my life experience into that, and it's really cool.
So there's two things on that, really. So I mean, you touched on art school, and you were saying obviously because you didn't go down the formal art school route, so many people go down. But one of the things that we chatted about when we were talking the other day, and it's a conversation I've been having quite a lot recently with different people about this idea of self-taught artists. I suppose a bit more of a sense of outsider art in its loosest term. So that, you know, that could be people who, by that I suppose, meaning people who are working outside of the more mainstream art world. So and we were talking a little bit about that, and I always feel, again, it's a personal point of view, that the artists that are coming through those processes, they feel fresher to me. And again, it's no criticism of anybody else, but there's a freshness to it. There's a unique quality to it, because they haven't gone through a cohort at an art school and come out with the stamp of, and with the best will in the world, there are going to be influences from the tutor, from their peer groups. It just happens, and it doesn't mean they're not going to be great and all the rest of it, but there's a uniqueness and a freshness I think you see in people's work for people who haven't done that. And then the people who have done that, they say they come out and they have to unlearn it. There's a process of needing to come out. Okay, that was great experience. Thank you very much. Now I need to unlearn that in a way to go and actually do something that is unique and special for me and is differential to what the other people are doing. Do you see what I mean? And I really see that personally.
Well, I do feel like I can kind of do what I want, and I feel like I've got these sort of pals that I can call on every so often, that in books that were making glass in the 12th century, and I could just sort of check up on what they're doing, and it just totally inspires me. And it's that really that is my, if anybody is guiding me, it's them, really. I feel like I've looked at so much medieval stained glass. I don't know if there's any medieval stained glass I haven't seen that hasn't had a photograph taken of it. And I just find it endlessly fascinating and endlessly relatable, even though it is very often people being eaten by monsters or whatever.
It's the what do I say? I suppose it's the intimacy often of the work, isn't it? For me, I love the quirkiness in it. Big fan of the quirkiness.
Can I show you a couple of pictures? Can I show you a couple of pictures? I got this book. They're not mine. This is stuff from. This is a book that the V&A. There's one talking of intimacy. Sorry.
If you hold
the intimacy. This is one of my favourite. I don't know if you can you see it?
Yeah.
With the little dog at the bottom of the bed. Can you see it?
I can, yeah.
I mean, I just think that's gorgeous because it's just intimate, like you say, and it's tiny, that one. And there's another one which I picked out that because I like the sort of lunacy of it. To me, I like this because this one here, the artist has had to fit this person into this insane bit of tracery window. And they just brilliantly managed to do this incredible perspective with his feet and hands and his little head all squashed in like that.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant, isn't it? And you wouldn't think of doing that unless you were presented with that shape.
Yeah.
I love it. Just love it. I just love it.
There's a comment on here which is really interesting. So from T-Bird London, thank you for that. Yeah, that's really interesting. So the BSM, which is the British Stained Master Glass Painters. Anyway,
yes, British Society of Master Glass Painters.
Master Glass Painters, yeah, who are very active online, and they seem to do brilliant work. They've quoted about that difficulty of understanding where the art and craft sits. Stained glass is the Cinderella of the arts. That's really interesting, isn't it?
What did they say? Can you say that again?
Yeah, they've quoted about that difficulty of understanding where the art and craft sits. So thinking about that continuous thing. And they said stained glass is the Cinderella of the art.
It's true. It's true.
Of talking about it. And actually, I could imagine now a very quirky, dark fairy story about Cinderella in the stained glass in an Angela Carter-esque sort of way. You know,
coming up. Yes. I'll just make a note of that.
Yeah.
I'll make a note of that.
Yes, there's a glass museum. So there's, you're getting an awful lot of lovely comments, lots of hearts for you as well.
Oh, thank you.
We've been talking around lots of things. We've got about 10 minutes left, I think, just under 10, 15 minutes at the most left. And one of the things that we've touched on a little bit as we've gone round, we've talked about the slow art, we've talked about in a way there's a type of therapy to doing it, the concentration, the slowing down, the taking the time to look and think of the details, and that helps. There's a meditative quality about that we've talked about, and you've referenced a couple of times throughout, but that helps you from a point of view in terms of well-being and health and mental health. And you have been very open and talked, you yourself have had some challenges, over the years when you were younger, and that some of these anxieties and things like, feeding into different stages of your career. And I mean, perhaps, I don't know, do you want to talk a bit about that and how maybe it now influences your work and your understanding and empathy of what other artists and creatives are going through?
Hard to know where to start. It's been really good for me to be able to express myself through art and realise that people respond with love, I think, is one thing I would say. That there's something about visual art that is, it's like you're really allowed to do what you want, I think. Maybe you're not, in terms of commercial I don't know anything about that really, but in general, I think that there's a general acceptance that the best art comes out of you and your soul and your heart. And I think that's what artists are striving for. And I never found that with music. With music, I always felt like I wasn't cute. My voice was too deep. It was too dark. People thought I was scary. It was like, it's not commercial. It's got to be 3 minutes. So much stuff. Like, and also, if you haven't basically become incredibly famous by the time you're 25, forget it. And it's not like that with visual art. I really feel, I don't know, maybe I've just been lucky, but I've found it incredibly positive, and that people respond really positively, and that has so helped me so much. I mean, my mental health problems were really bad in my teens and 20s, and I kind of got a bit better in my 30s and 40s, but it's really only been in the past decade that I've started to feel like I can cope, and I'm not just a nervous wreck. And it's been largely because it's like my little world, and I mean, I think most artists will be able to relate to that. It's just a world that you can enter that's just yours, and just go, and it's great.
It's claiming it back, isn't it, and being creative and making it work for you. And I know we've talked about this, and I've been very open about, people know I've written about it a few different times about my challenges with OCD, and I find that creative activity is incredibly beneficial, and I feel I have to be involved in a role that's to a degree creative. I mean, I don't have time always to do as much sketching and knitting, and I have to say I'd love to do some stained glass now, have a go at that. I'd love to have time to do more of that, but it's the creativity and thinking up ideas and getting to meet people like you, I think, Pinkie, from across all these different sectors. It's meeting these incredibly passionate, wonderful, inspirational, creative people, and how they've come to a point where they're actually reinvesting that back into their career and their work, and you can really see the positive benefits of that. And I think we reference the National Museum of Scotland, who have recently acquired some of your work, and I think it's really interesting that the piece that they've acquired is actually an incredibly personal story for you. They haven't chosen the one that you included, for example, in the Ruskin Prize that we ran, which is incredibly impactful. They've chosen something that is a very personal story, but there's also, I suppose, there's an art historical context to it.
Yeah.
So,
about
that. Such a good story.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, the personal is political, I suppose, but I mean that I was particularly pleased about, because that was have I got time to tell this? The story of a place a place that was very precious to me when I was a child growing up. We used to go stay with my granddad in Argyll, and he had a little cottage just on the edge of this fantastic sheltered sandy bay, on the west coast, and it was idyllic. I mean, we used to go bathing in there, and there'd be seals and porpoises and snipe and phosphorescence. I've got so many amazing memories of this, and it was idyllic. It was our family's favourite place to go. And then in the 70s, the government sold the land and the loch all around my granddad's cottage to a company to build oil rig platforms, the platforms that oil rigs sit on, to float out to sea. And the place was completely devastated for miles. Explosives put in the bottom of the loch. It was blown to smithereens, massive roads, a whole village, concrete village was built. And it was devastating for a 10-year-old to suddenly realise that, you know, these things that, you know, when you're small and there's just these tiny plants and little rocks and things, and, you know, you go back to this, if you're going back to the same place every year, you know, you recognise that rock and you recognise, they become like your friends. And then suddenly this was just blown to bits. And the company that didn't get any orders, so the whole thing was a white elephant, and it was like derelict for decades. And eventually it was sold off to a hotel company who got the place extremely cheap. And there's now a marina and a luxury hotel there. And that's the only report of Addy on the internet. That's the only thing I find out about it, is that there's a hotel there. So this whole story was being lost. And I realised I was practically the only person left that could still tell this story. So I made a piece of work about it. And then the National Museum of Scotland's bought it. So that story is going to be told to the public. And I'm really thrilled to bits about it. So the art can communicate.
Yeah, so I mean, so that piece of work they've acquired. Oh, you just cut out there for me for 1 second.
Sorry,
yes, that piece they've acquired, as you say it. Am I cutting out? Can you hear me now?
Off and on. Okay, am I cutting out, or is it just you?
Yeah. A little bit, but I can hear you.
Shall I keep talking,
so, I mean,
and then you'd be able to...
I think the fact that it's
I can't hear you, Kate.
I can hear you now, it's fine.
Okay. The fact that it's...
Can you hear me now, Pinkie?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you?
I can hear you.
I can, yeah. It's,
I can hear you.
I think we're all right again. I've got one of the things we've got 5 minutes left. I've got show more stained glass. People should better understand the I suppose the comment about the Cinderella of the arts and crafts world. I think I would like to see a lot more of that going on. So maybe we need to throw the gauntlet down there if there's anybody on the call around that might want to get involved in some way. And I just wanted to reference Outside In Pallant House, because I know that I've done some work with them. They're a fantastic organisation. So going back to what we were talking about, so and they have, I think they showed some of your work in the past. So I was whether you wanted to say anything about those organisations.
Yes, well, that was fantastic because after I got told that I was a contemporary artist, and basically I just didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to try and do. And I mean, I was living in rural patch and didn't have any contacts in the art world at all. I discovered Outside In, who are an organisation for art self-taught and disabled artists, or basically artists outside. We don't have access to the art world, which I don't. And they were doing a craft exhibition. And so I applied for that and was delighted to get a piece accepted. It was the first time I'd ever had anything exhibited. And that started at Pallant House. So I travelled down to see that, and it was amazing. It's such a beautiful gallery. It was so exciting to see my work displayed in a fantastic gallery. And people looking at it, and it was just wonderful. And I mean, really, after that, that was just the thing that gave me all I needed, really, to just keep going. And that was it. I was off.
Yeah.
And I've focused quite a lot since then, and it's been brilliant. Really
and just since
beautiful
then,
gallery.
it's all been woo.
It has really. I think when I realised that there was a world outside this very dry academic, maybe a bit cliquey art school world, when I realised that you could still be an artist, I just thought, this is fantastic. I can just do what I want now. And it's that that people got something from it, and that it wasn't just a sort of self-indulgence. Made it really exciting for me, because I felt like what I was doing was accessible, and that, for me that's really important, because I just think, what's the point? You know, I mean, it's just self-indulgent silliness otherwise.
So what's next then? We've got a couple of minutes left, and thank you for the person who's shared the link to the self-portrait dreaming Brookle TikTok.
Oh yes, well thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Very kind. So you'll be able to have.
Yes, well,
Yes,
I hope that's next. I mean, that was sad, because the Scotland bought that just before lockdown. It's been sitting there waiting for the public ever since. So, with any luck, that people will go to see that in Edinburgh soon. And what else is happening? What's happening? Well, I'm just keep on doing work. I've got Henry Box Gallery. Sells my work in New York sometimes, in the Outsider Art Fair, and in exhibitions he does in London, and the Camorra Gallery, which is near Inverness. So it's going along.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I mean, to round off, Pinkie, what tips? Any tips for anybody on the call? Any tips for anybody who might want to, perhaps having a challenging time at the moment, or is thinking, actually, do you know, I want to get into this. I want to have a stained glass. Do you have any final tips or words of wisdom?
Well, I would say that if you want to do stained glass painting, which is really where it starts to get exciting, and you can do more narrative stuff. Then if you can find somewhere, I think there are places that will do classes where you can paint. And I mean, even if you just get one bit of glass and then paint a picture and fire it in their kiln, you'll find it exciting, because, you know, seeing it with the light coming through it there's nothing like it. It's really unbeatable. And, you know, that's not that hard to do. When you're trying to put together lots and lots and lots of bits, and then it's hard.
That's very good.
But you can just paint a single piece of glass and fire it in the kiln, and it's pretty exciting. And then if you can do that with the black paint, and then do a second firing using silver stain to get the gold. And I mean, that's even just on a clear bit of glass, that can look amazing. So go for it, definitely. And if you just want to carry on.
If people want to find out more about your work, Pinkie, they can go to your website, can't they? So they go to your website, then go on Instagram as well.
Yes. So pinkiemaclure.net is the website. Instagram is pinkie.maclure.
So I would encourage you to start.
Sorry, I can't.
I would encourage everybody to follow you.
Oh yes, please do.
Following Big Draw, that'd be great as well. I'm sorry, I think we've got a slight lag here. I think it's my end. I've got some sound issues. So I think I'm gonna say goodbye. I'm gonna say thank you so much to Pinkie for joining us on the call today. The time out to talk about her practice and her success, and I think it's going to just carry on going upwards for you, Pinkie. So maybe we can hang on to your coattails as you become more and more famous. Hold on.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been lovely
to talk. It's been an absolute pleasure. always love talking to you. And if people want to do, we can do another one. And maybe we should do one about where stained glass sits. Maybe that's something we need to be talking about, this whole
Absolutely.